Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel and my first YouTube video. So today I will be doing a Resto Druid guide for PvP. I've gotten a lot of requests from my stream, a lot of friends have been asking me to make a guide, and I feel like there's not too many guides or even content for Resto Druid's PvP, so I thought I'd go ahead and make my own version, and I hope that it's informative and maybe you can learn something. So it is going to be pretty raw and off the top of my head with not too much editing, but that being said, I am going to try to cover everything, which includes the covenants and their abilities, Soulbinds and Conduits, legendary powers, talents, and a little bit of gear and stats. So the first thing I'm going to talk about are the covenants. You really have two options for Resto Druids in PvP. The first one being Necrolord and the second one being Night Fae. So I'm going to talk about Necrolord first, as that's what I am on my druid. So Necrolord, you're given a signature ability, which is Fleshcraft. So regardless of your class or spec, everybody has Fleshcraft if they choose Necrolord. And this is basically just a shield, absorbs some damage. You can read the tooltip, but yeah, it's just a shield, absorbs some damage. So you use it right when the arena gates open, or if you have time in between an arena, in the game, go ahead and pop it. And then moving on to the class ability, we have Adaptive Swarm. So this is a pretty versatile ability, meaning we can use it offensively and defensively. Most of the time you're going to be using it as an extra hot, or as well as to empower your current hots. Basically it's just like more healing, and it makes your current hots stronger. You can also use it offensively to assist your team in damage. So it's a pretty good ability. And then I'm gonna go ahead and talk about the Conduits. So for the Soulbinds for Necrolord, you're gonna want to choose Plague Deviser Merilith, and then you have to choose Volatile Solvent as the first Soulbind ability, and then you've given a path if you want to go Potency, Endurance, or Finesse, but your decision is going to be based off of the next row, which is Ooze's Frictionless Coating, Travel with Bloop, or Plaguey's Preemptive Strike. Out of these three, Ooze's Frictionless Coating is the best option. When reduced below 50% health, you are granted a shield for 15% of your maximum health. So basically, whenever you just fall below 50% health, bam, you're given a shield for 15% of your maximum health. So it's great, helps you survive. Travel with Bloop just gives you more speed, which you don't really need as a druid right now. You have a lot of movement speed abilities already, and then Preemptive Strike is just a little bit more damage. So you're going to want to pick Frictionless Coating, and in order to get that, you have to choose a Potency Conduit. And the Potency Conduit I've gone with is Evolved Swarm, which just makes our Adaptive Swarm, which was our class ability from Necrolord, it just makes it stronger, increases the periodic effects, so we get more healing or more damage. So good conduit, and then we go from there. Obviously, like I said, Frictionless Coating, and then you're given an Endurance Conduit option. The one I've chosen is Well-Honed Instincts. This is a really, really good conduit. When you fall below a specific percentage of health, you cast Frenzied Regeneration. And it's really good because you don't have to be spec'd into Guardian Affinity. You could be Balance or Feral Affinity, and you still get the benefit of Frenzied Regeneration. And it doesn't put you in bear form. So as soon as you fall below a percentage of health, you get Frenzied Regeneration. So it's really, really good. And then moving on, these two are just like PvE options. They don't impact arena whatsoever, so you can choose whichever one you want. And then we're given an option for another potency conduit, and I've gone with Ready for Anything, which reduces the cooldown of Nature's Swiftness, which is our instant heal. And you could choose Floral Recycling, which Swiftman increases. Swiftman's healing is increased by whatever percentage of the consumed heal over time effect. Or you could play Flash of Clarity, which regrowth heals for an additional percentage, the clear cast regrowth. I think Ready for Anything is a little bit better. It's just, you know, reduces the cooldown of Nature's Swiftness, whereas Flash of Clarity, it's kind of dependent on procs of clear cast, and regrowth can be interrupted. And then Floral Recycling, it can be good, but I just think Ready for Anything right now is just more concrete. And then you're given an option of Finesse or another Endurance conduit. I went ahead with the Finesse conduit since I already had one Endurance conduit, and the one I went with is Born of the Wilds, and it just reduces the cooldown of Mighty Bash, Mass Entanglement, and Heart of the Wild. So it's just good to have a Mighty Bash on a shorter cooldown, or Heart of the Wild if you play it. Just good to have on a shorter cooldown. And then Ultimate Form, the final Soulbind ability. This is the main reason as to why I went Necrolord. While channeling Fleshcraft, which was the signature ability of Necrolord, you are immune to crowd control, and you regenerate 2% of health every 1 second. So while channeling Fleshcraft, you're immune to crowd control. So basically this means if somebody's about to crowd control you, boom, you press the shield and you can't get crowd controlled. So you have to use it a little preemptively, but a good example of this is like, say a rogue is running at you and he's about to kidney shot you, or he's about to blind you. You can press Fleshcraft and you can immune the blind, or you could immune the kidney shot. So you have to use it a little preemptively, but it's really, really big to immune a crowd control. And the good thing is, say you use it preemptively, the rogue's running at you, you use it, and he doesn't kidney you, he doesn't blind you, he waits. Well, if you finish the full channel of Fleshcraft, you gain 4 seconds of crowd control immunity. So you can't get crowd controlled for another 4 seconds. So you can be like, you can tell your team, hey, I'm about to get crowd controlled, like help me. Or you can reposition yourself and get away. And on top of this, you're getting healed for 2% of your health every second. So this is the main reason as to why I went Necrolord, and it's really, really strong ability. It does have, I guess you could say, a little skill cap, if you want to say, because you do have to use it preemptively to get the full effect, but it's a really good ability. So I think that covers it for Necrolord. I'm gonna briefly talk about Night Fae. I haven't played too much Night Fae. I do have a second Druid and I messed around with Night Fae on there, but most of the stuff as far as the conduits is pretty similar, so I'm just gonna jump right into it. You're gonna want to choose Dreamweaver as the Soulbind, and then you're given an option. You have to choose Pod Tender. Pod Tender basically is kind of like a cheat death. So when you die, you're put into this little seed or pod, and you have 10 seconds to where if your seed does not die, you come back to life. So for 10 seconds, your team has to either heal your seed or crowd control and peel and just try to keep your seed alive for 10 seconds and you come back to life. So it's kind of a cheat death. And then moving on, we have an Endurance or Finesse conduit. I went with the Finesse Conduit, Born of the Wilds, which I talked about in the Necrolord section. So I'm just going to move on to the Potency Conduit. And I went with Conflex of Elements, which is while channeling Convoke, your damage and healing are increased. And Convoke of the Spirits is the class ability for Night Fae. And Convoke is a really strong ability. It does a lot of healing or a lot of damage based on if you are in Feral Affinity, or if you're in Feral form, Boomkin form, or if you're not in a form. So if you're in Feral or Boomkin form, it does damage. If you're not in a form, it does healing. And it does a lot of damage or a lot of healing. So it's a really strong ability, and this conduit just increases the damage and healing of it. The reason I don't really like Night Fae is while this ability is really strong, it's a channeled ability. So it can be interrupted or stopped pretty easily, and it's a pretty long cooldown, 2 minutes for it, but it is an option. And then we have to choose Soothing Voice, Social Butterfly, or Empowered Chrysalis. Soothing Voice, just after a CC, your target's movement speed is reduced by 90%, decaying rapidly. I feel like that's not as strong as the other two, which is the Butterfly one, which gives you versatility. This could be good, but I went ahead with the Empowered. 10% of your overhealing received or done remains as a shield on the target up to 10% of the caster's health. So all the overhealing you do, it gives your target a shield up to 10% of their health. So a lot of the time, you know, our HOTS are doing overhealing, so it's good to get some value from that overhealing. And then from there, we have to choose another Finesse Conduit. I went with Tireless Pursuit. So for however many seconds after leaving cat form or travel form, you retain up to 40% movement speed. So basically every time you shift out of cat form or travel form, you have extra movement speed, which is good. You can just kind of be running fast all the time. And then we have the Endurance Conduit. I went ahead with Well-Honed Instincts, which I covered in the Necrolord section. So then from there you can choose either of these two, which are PvE conduits, and they don't affect PvP at all. And then finally you have Field of Blossoms, which when you're casting Convoke of the Spirits, which is Convoke the Spirits, which is the class ability of Night Fae, it puts flowers at your feet that increase your haste while you stand with them. So basically, if you cast Convoke the Spirits and you stand still, you get more haste. So I think that covers Night Fae. I think now I'm gonna talk about. So I talked about the Covenants and their abilities. Talked about the Soulbinds and Conduits. I'll talk about the Legendaries now. So let's talk about Verdant Infusion. This is the legendary I think a lot of people will most likely be playing. Swiftman no longer consumes a heal over time effect and extends the duration of your heal over time effects on the target by 8 seconds. So basically, when Shadowlands came out, Druids got changed to where Swiftmend would consume your hot, meaning it would like eat the hot and take it away. But with this legendary, Swiftmend doesn't take the hot away, and in fact it extends the duration of the heal over time effect. So it's kind of like the old Swiftmend, like from BFA, but it also extends the duration. So it's a really good legendary. That's what I use most of the time. Another option is the Dark Titan's Lesson, which you may Life Bloom 2 targets at once, but Life Bloom's healing is reduced by 10%. So you can have a life bloom on yourself, or you could have a life bloom on a DPS as well as yourself, or you could have a life bloom on both your partners. I would recommend this if you are fighting like a rot team, like maybe a shadow play or something where your whole team is just getting slowly rotted down, then this would be a good option. And you could combine this legendary with photosynthesis, a talent, but I'll talk a little bit more about that when I get into the talents. Okay. Finally, let's see, there's a couple other options you can play. Circle of Life and Death is an option. Your damage over time effects deal their damage in 25% less time, and your healing over time effects in 15% less time. So having your HOTS just heal quicker is nice. I don't know how significant 15% less time is. And right now I feel like our HOTS just don't heal as much. The healing just feels low, so I don't know how beneficial this legendary power is, but it is an option and it might be better later on, so I don't want to just, throw it to the side. I feel like I need to test it more, but I thought I'd go ahead and mention it. And then I think that kind of covers it. Oath of the Elder Druid. Effects of Thick Hide, Astral Influence, Feline Swiftness, and Ysera's Gift increase by 75%. And then when you shift into your Affinities form, you gain Heart of the Wild for 10 seconds. This could also potentially be an option. Ysera's Gift does do a lot of healing, so having that increase by 75% could be a significant amount where you would maybe want to play this legendary. I haven't played it myself, haven't tested it, so I don't know how strong it is, but I could potentially see some people playing this and it could end up being really good, but I need to test it myself more. But I thought I would go ahead and just name it as well. But for the most part, I think Verdant Infusion is just really, really strong. And I think the legendary that I'm going to be playing the most. So I think I'll talk about the talents now. So the first tier, level 15, we have Abundance, Nourish, and Cenarian Ward. For the most part, you're going to want to play Cenarian Ward. This is a really good talent because it cannot get purged, so the enemy team has no way to stop this shield, this ward or healing, and it's a 30-second cooldown, so it's pretty good. There is times where you could maybe play Nourish. I guess you could play Nourish if you feel like you can get a lot of casts off, meaning your job is to just stand really far away and just spam heal, basically just be a heal bot. So maybe you could play this like if you're playing a comp like Shadow Play where you have two casters and you don't really have to worry about getting interrupted, and you're just playing max distance away from them and just spam healing them. So in comps like that you would play Nourish, but I think Cenarian Ward is the default pick in the first tier. And then the next tier, level 25, you have Tiger Dash, Renewal, or Wild Charge. You're never going to play Tiger Dash. I personally always play Wild Charge. Wild Charge is only a 15-second cooldown, and it has a couple different uses. Most of the time you're going to be using it to just leap away or leap to a teammate, or you're going to go in cat form and leap behind an enemy. So that's Wild Charge. You could play Renewal if you're really worried about yourself and dying. It is a long cooldown, so I feel like Wild Charge is just so much better because you can just get away and avoid the damage instead of having to heal it with Renewal. But if you know you're the target and you're fighting a comp where their damage is very predictable and it's very setup based, and you know you have Renewal, you can maybe survive. But I think Wild Charge is just what I always play. So next tier, level 30, we have Balance Affinity, Feral Affinity, and Guardian Affinity. So it's difficult to tell you which one to play. It really depends on what comp you're playing, what comp you're fighting against, and what playstyle you like. So for instance, for me, I usually play Rogue Mage Druid in 3s. So I have to assist my team with Cyclone. So I usually play Balance Affinity for the extra range for the 5 yards on all your abilities. So that makes me able to Cyclone further away. Another pro of Balance Affinity is you gain Moonkin form. And so when you go in Moonkin form, you cannot get polymorphed. So if you're fighting a mage, Balance Affinity is always a great option because you can just go in Moonkin form and you can cast Regrowth, you can cast Cyclone, and you can't get polymorphed. Feral Affinity is pretty good too because you gain 2 extra stuns with the Rake stun and the Maim, and it gives you a good amount of damage, and on top of that it increases your movement speed. So I feel like Feral Affinity, you're gonna play it in a comp where you need the extra stuns and you feel like you can get a lot of restelts, and you know, it's kind of setup based. So that's Feral Affinity. Guardian Affinity is probably the safest option for a lot of players. It just reduces all damage you take, and it gives you Frenzied Regeneration, which is a really big heal. Heals you for 32% of your health over 3 seconds. So that's why a lot of people like Guardian Affinity. And you get Incapacitating Roar, which is a 3-second disorient on a 30-second cooldown. So Guardian Affinity is really good. It's probably the safest option from the 3 in terms of survivability, but it also just gives you that little extra CC with the Incapacitating Roar. So Guardian Affinity is probably the default pick. I play Balance Affinity personally, like I said, because of my the comp I play where I have to Cyclone a lot. So I like the extra range on Cyclone. And if you're fighting a mage, you're probably going to want to play Balance Affinity so you can immune the polymorphs. But it's very difficult to tell you guys which one to play, but hopefully that can help. Level 35, the next tier, we have Mighty Bash, Mass Entanglement, and Heart of the Wild. Mighty Bash is a 4-second stun on a 1-minute cooldown. I usually play this most of the time. Mass Entanglement can be good if you know you're fighting 2 melee and you don't have a root on your team. It's a 30-second cooldown, just roots, it's like a mass root, so probably you could play this if you're fighting double melee, and I don't know, maybe you're playing like Shadow Play and just you're trying to help your casters get some distance away from the melee. Another option is Heart of the Wild. So if you feel like you're gonna do a lot of damage or your team needs extra damage, this along with Feral Affinity combine really well for a lot of damage, but it is a 5-minute cooldown, so it's difficult to get very high value with Heart of the Wild in 3v3, but if you feel like you can do it, then it is a good option. You can definitely do a lot of damage, but I personally play Mighty Bash. If your team has a lot of stuns, then you might want to just play Mass Entanglement or Heart of the Wild, but it's just kind of comp dependent. Finally, we have level 40 tier, Soul of the Forest, Cultivation, Incarnation. I don't ever recommend Incarnation. I think the only time maybe Incarnation is good is if you're fighting against triple DPS, and then Incarnation is good, but you're not going to fight triple DPS, you know, that often, if ever, in high rated 3v3. So Soul of the Forest is the main option here. Swiftman increases the healing of your next regrowth or rejuvenation by 200%, or your next wild growth by 75%. And you can combine this with Nature Swiftness, so you can get a big regrowth off without casting. So you just rejuve, Swiftmend, NS regrowth, and it's gonna be a huge regrowth because of the Soul of the Forest. Increases the regrowth by 200%, and you combine it with Nature Swiftness. Cultivation can be used if you're fighting a rot team like Shadow Play, where your whole team is just gonna slowly rot. So maybe like you're fighting Boomkin Ellie or Ellie Shadow Priest Lock, you know, the teams that just slowly rot you down. Cultivation gives you an extra hot. So when Rejuvenation heals the target below 60% health, it applies Cultivation, which is just another hot, healing them. So just kind of helps with that slow rot spread pressure. But I still prefer Soul of the Forest. But Cultivation can be an option. I don't want to completely throw it out of the window. Then moving on to level 45 tier, we have Inner Peace, Spring Blossoms, Overgrowth. You're never going to play Inner Peace. Most of the time you're going to play Overgrowth. It applies Life Bloom, Rejuvenation, Wild Growth, and Regrowths heal over time. So basically it just applies all your hots on a target, and it's a 1 minute cooldown. This is really good because if one of your teammates gets swapped to, you can instantly just Overgrowth, or maybe you're coming out of a crowd control, instantly Overgrowth, get all your hots out, instead of having to, you know, put up all your hots one by one, global by global. Spring Blossoms can be used if maybe you're healing your teammates that aren't very mobile, so maybe like a Shadow Priest or a Warlock that just has to tank the damage and not move, or you're fighting against two melee. It basically just each target that's healed by Florence is healed for an additional, so that's the mushroom kind of thing. It just increases the healing, puts up another hot. See here, there we go. Spring Blossoms just puts up another hot while they're standing in the mushroom. So like maybe you have two melees just running down your Warlock. You can just tell them to stand in the mushroom for extra healing. But most of the time I think Overgrowth is going to be the way to go. Finally, we have level 50. You have Photosynthesis, Germination, and Flourish. I prefer Germination. I don't think Flourish is very good. Photosynthesis can be good if you feel like you're going to be the target. You can just put a Life Bloom on yourself and all your periodic heals heal 20% faster. So if you feel like you're the target, maybe play Photosynthesis, but Germination gives you an extra rejuvenation, so you can apply 2 rejuvenations. I like Germination, however, if you're playing the Legendary, the Dark Titans lesson, which I talked about earlier, which you may apply 2 Life Blooms, then you might want to play Photosynthesis. So you can keep 1 life bloom on yourself and 1 life bloom on your teammate. So you can have 2 life blooms, and then if you have 1 life bloom on yourself, your healing is increased by 20%, or your periodic heals heal 20% faster. So you can kind of capitalize that legendary with Photosynthesis. But I think that covers it for the regular talents. As far as PvP talents go, by default, I like to play Focus Growth. It just reduces the mana cost of your life bloom, and your life bloom applies Focus Growth to the target, increasing life bloom's healing by 8%, and it stacks up to 3 times. So it just increases your life bloom healing and reduces the mana cost. So it's really good. Just more healing and helps with mana. And then I have Thorns. You want to play Thorns if you're fighting a melee. So even if there's just 1 melee, I usually play Thorns. And Reactive Resin is another option you're going to play if you're fighting into a melee. It just gives rejuvenation. Basically, when you have rejuvenation, if a melee if they critically strike you, it increases their duration of rejuvenation, so you don't have to put rejuvenation up again, if that makes sense. It just makes the duration of rejuvenation longer, which in the long run will help you with mana. Other options for PvP talents: Mark of the Wild if you're fighting like a rot team that does nature, fire, frost, or arcane damage. It's just reduced by 15%. The downside of Mark of the Wild is it can be purged, so you might have to constantly reapply it, but it is an option. Another option is Master Shapeshifter. So if you're playing maybe Heart of the Wild, you're going to want to try and play Master Shapeshifters to increase your damage and combine it with Heart of the Wild and maybe Feral Affinity. So basically Master Shapeshifter just makes all of these Balance, Feral, and Guardian Affinity stronger based on what form you're in. So most of the time if you're playing this, you're going to be playing Heart of the Wild. Another option is High Winds, which after your cyclone ends, it reduces the target's damage by 30% for 4 seconds though. So that's quite significant, 30% of damage reduction for 4 seconds. There are times when you can play Deep Roots or Entangling Bark. Entangling Bark you probably can play if you're fighting 2 melee. So you can just throw up Iron Bark and it'll root them instantly. And it'll constantly root them as long as you have Iron Bark active. Deep Roots increases the amount of damage required to cancel your Entangling Roots by 250%. I feel like this got nerfed. I think it used to be more, but maybe you're playing like with a Destro Warlock and you want to root somebody so they can just cast, and the amount of damage it'll take for the roots to break is a lot more, but I feel like this isn't that good. So I think that covers it though for talents. I hope I did a good job there. I think it's a lot to talk about, and it's really dependent on the comp you're playing and the comp you're fighting. A lot of it is situational, and you're gonna have to change every time from match to match, but I think that covers it for talents. I think I'll talk about just a little bit about gear. So for the most part, you're gonna want haste and versatility. Mastery is good because your healing is increased by a percentage of each of your heal over time effects on the target. The problem right now is our heal over time effects are just really weak, so increasing the mastery of them when they're already so weak is not the best option. That's why I've gone for haste and versatility pieces. I think in a perfect world, you're gonna want to aim for 21% haste and then just get as much mastery and as much versatility as possible. But yeah, for now I'm just wearing the PvP gear, which is just mostly haste versatility, and I have enchants for haste on my rings and 30 plus stats on my chest and the 20 stamina minor speed increase on my cloak, and then on my weapon I'm using the celestial guidance. So yeah, not too much to talk about there, but I think that's about it. So I hope this Resto Druid guide kind of helped you guys. I feel like I try to cover everything just from the top of my head. So if you could please just share this video and like and comment of what I can improve, and I'll post my Twitch. I stream a lot, so if you guys would like to come see some high Resto Druid gameplay along with viewer twos, just come by and check my stream. And thank you for watching, and have a great rest of your day.